Hello, I'm Mari Ashby, and tackling all the burning issues of the week, my guests, the Conservative MP for Sherwood, Mark Spencer, and Kat Boettge from the Green Party. Kat is the Green Party organiser for the East Midlands and was the party's lead candidate here in the recent European elections. So first, let's get your reactions on the big story of the moment, of course, the Scottish referendum and calls for more powers for our local councils here in the East Midlands. Mark, where does this Scottish vote leave us here in the East Midlands?
Well, I think for a start we should welcome the vote that we want to stay together as a union. I think then it starts the debate as to what we want to see, how our local authorities stack up and how we organise them. And I think that's a debate which has been a long time coming and one which I'm very keen to get stuck into and to change the model which we currently have.
Has your leader, David Cameron, promised too much, though, to the Scots?
No, not at all. No, I think what he's done is he's said that we need a fairer system. We need to make sure that Scottish people are in control of their own destiny. And I think at the same time we need to make sure the English are in control of their own destiny. That seems fairly fair and fairly logical to me.
Kat Boettge, you tweeted that you were disappointed that Scotland didn't vote for independence. Why was that?
Well, I mean, first of all, I respect the Scottish choice, but we were hoping for a yes to independence for various reasons. I mean, first of all, I understand the Scottish being frustrated with being governed by a government they haven't really voted in. The support for the Conservative Party is quite limited in Scotland, but nevertheless, they're ruled by them. But I was hoping that this vote would actually really open up our system of democracy, which needs revising.
But surely the issues that you're really concerned with in the Green Party, climate change, for example, can only really be tackled on a global basis. So having more countries is going to slow that down.
Well, I think we need to work together, for example, in the European Union. However, we need to make decisions on the lowest appropriate level. That's what we in the Green Party want to promote. So devolution we welcome very much, and I agree it's long coming, and we need to look at giving more power for local authorities or regional councils.
What will these powers look like here in the East Midlands, Mark? What are we talking about if we can visualise what we might see and feel here in the East Midlands?
Well, for me, it's about passing down that power as low as possible. And I'd like to see the model of unitary authorities looked at with more power for parish councils and for town councils. So simplistically, frankly, if you give town councils the ability to grit their own roads, they know those roads much better. They know the housing estates in which there is a challenge in terms of clearing snow, and they're able to deliver that much better than a centralised system.
And you look like you're agreeing with that.
Yes, but I would also like to see more planning authority, more powers regards to public services, schools, NHS, so, yeah, and even income tax. I think it'll be an idea that this would be localised.
OK. Well, more from you both, of course, in a moment. And the leader of one of our city councils who wants more control over transport and the economy will be joining us too. Thanks, John. Well, we're joined in the studio now by the leader of Derby City Council, Ranjit Banwait. Ranjit, we were hearing there that these powers will take time. Do you want these powers, and what powers do you want?
Well, look, if you look at the kind of tough challenges facing communities across the United Kingdom, from whether it's in Glasgow or Derby, they can't be dealt with effectively from Westminster, and MPs, for them to be, it's very difficult for them to be truly local. But councillors,
why can't they be dealt with from Westminster?
If you look at it like councillors, council leaders like myself, we are from the community, we are very close to those communities. I was born and bred in the city. I represent as a council leader. You know, we are very closely connected to those challenges and issues.
Community in Sherwood, I'd say as well.
Councillors are much more closer to those challenges, and if you look at the centralised approach that this government's taken, it's actually set us back, and we are one of the most centralised Western democracies.
So, I understand what you're saying, but what exactly is it you want to do with these new powers?
Well, in 2006, the then Secretary of State for Communities and Local Government, David Miliband, proposed some very radical double devolution proposals, and that was about taking power along with financing from the centre to local community, to councils, and then for councils to pass those on down to local communities and local neighbourhoods. Great progress was made in that. Communities like the one I represent in Derby were set up community forums and boards, but under this government...
I'm still not clear what it is you'd achieve with these new powers if you had them.
Well, through these new powers we can deal with strategic issues, whether there be deals with tackling congestion, dealing with social inequality, health inequality issues, bringing regeneration to drive forward
well, Mark,
employment.
these three cities in the East Midlands all have Labour councils. Would you, as a Conservative MP, be happy to give more powers to councils like Ranjit?
I actually want to go
on
lower.
On the basis of the things that he's talking about.
I want to go much lower down the structure and get much closer to people, frankly. I think parish councils and town councils are the way forward, and to give those responsibility for those things that really matter to them. So, you know, cleaning your streets in your town, you could operate via a town council, and those sorts of smaller details. Now,
well, you were a county councillor at one point, though.
Yep.
Are councils up to the job? I mean, what's the calibre of county councillors compared to MPs, for example?
Well, I think there are some very good councillors out there. There's some very poor ones. I think there's some good MPs and there's some poor MPs.
Are East Midlands councils up to the job?
I think, actually, strategically, we should probably look at changing the model, and we should consider going to unitary authorities and passing more power as low down the structure as you can to parish and town councils.
OK, well, Kat, you were a councillor on Eastwood Borough Council. Should councils like Derby, Leicester, Nottingham have more powers?
Sorry, it was Kimberley. But,
Kimberley, sorry, yeah.
Yes, I strangely enough quite agree with Mark here. The lowest level possible, I would like to see powers, and we would like to support a system that is bottom up. So that would also include that voters have got the opportunity to deselect or de-elect somebody. I think the top-down system has not served us, and we've lost the local needs being met.
OK, but if we're talking about councils being up to the job, when we're talking about issues like planning, economic development, for example, could they deal with that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. They know the needs of the community, they know the facilities, they know the businesses. I would give far more power on this level, absolutely.
I think you've got to work together, and some of the more strategic decisions actually do work at a higher level. So, for example, development of the A453 only happened with Nottingham working with Derby and coming together, lobbying government and getting that cash.
Well, I've never heard of a
sorted
politician or a councillor not wanting more powers, but do people want the powers that you're talking about? Is there any evidence out there that you know, that working people want you to have more powers in the first place?
Well, I think so. The previous government introduced some really radical proposals about devolution. As I said, we've set up community boards and forums at a very local level, but without increased powers and without financing, they become, you know, a bit of a talking shop. And as I said, it's been really frustrating as a councillor that this government spent, you know, its fifth year of term of office talking about devolution, and that's extremely frustrating.
So we do need they voted against a city mayor, for example. Leicester went for one. So when we're talking about giving more powers, you know, people have already said they don't want that locally.
I've just surveyed the whole of Hucknall town, because there was a rumour that the City Council wanted to take over Hucknall, and actually the majority of people came back and said we'd rather have a Hucknall Town Council than we would be under the control of the County Council and Ashfield District Council. So I think people are thirsty for that power to go as low as possible.
I'm certainly from my experiences, when I'm out talking to local residents on the doorsteps through our community walkabouts, there is a real appetite for residents to want more say in running local services, and that's the future.
OK, Ranjit, thanks very much indeed for joining us. Last word, by the way, on this from Conservative councillor for Bingham, Francis Purdue-Horan, who tweeted me yesterday to say he wishes to confirm categorically that he has no immediate plans to stand for the post of First Minister of the East Midlands. So now we know. And tomorrow night on BBC One, Inside Out, we'll be taking a closer look at how devolution would work in the East Midlands. I'll be reporting from Rutland and from East Midlands Airport. That's BBC One tomorrow night at 7:30. Now, let's take a look at some environmental issues now, and protesters are gathering all over the world today to call for more action on climate change. Meanwhile, here in the East Midlands, a report claims we have 3 of the worst polluting power stations in Europe. The coal-fired power stations at Ratcliffe-on-Soar, Markham and West Burton are a serious danger to health and should be closed down immediately, according to a coalition of environmental groups. But can we afford to shut down our coal-fired power stations, and what's being done to make them better? Jane Dodge reports.
It's a well-known landmark in the East Midlands. Ratcliffe-on-Soar is one of 3 coal-fired power stations in Nottinghamshire. But it's the dirtiest form of energy and has long been the bane of green activists. On this occasion, hundreds of protesters pulled down sections of the perimeter fence. Now Nottinghamshire's 3 power stations have been named and shamed in a study by environmental groups called Europe's Dirty 30. The report found that coal-fired power stations produced just under a third of the UK's electricity supply last year, but was responsible for nearly 2/3 of carbon emissions. It claims that the resulting air pollution causes 1,600 deaths a year, and cheap coal has meant output has gone up, not down. Environmentalists want the old coal-fired power stations confined to the history books. 5 have closed in the last 2 years. Another 2 are due to close by the end of 2015. Even someone like John Unwin, once a miner, now working at Snibson Discovery Centre, says the writing's on the wall.
Well, Kat, on the face of it, it's a worrying report, but as the businessman we heard in Jane Dodge's report there said, supporting greener energy means prices will go up.
This is incorrect. If we are facing climate change. Now, this is a huge catastrophe we, our children and grandchildren will have to face. Now, that's going to be very costly, not only in money terms, but also in human lives, actually. So we cannot afford to wait any longer. Plus, looking economically in areas where they have invested greatly in sustainable energies, it's been creating a lot of jobs. For example, solar energy worldwide has produced more jobs than the entire fossil fuel industry together. So it makes also economic sense.
So are you saying that alternative energy like solar or wind power aren't more expensive or are more expensive?
They might be slightly more expensive in the short term, but in the long term we have to do so.
Because some reports are saying that alternative energy could be twice as expensive.
No, that's incorrect, and we've seen it in Germany. And actually, the price increase in Germany was more down to the poor grid management. These are all quite a lot of scaremongering. It's actually...
Mark, it's just all scare talk.
Well, I think, ironically, you know, being lectured by someone from Germany about coal-fired power when the Germans are building coal-fired power faster than we are is a bit ironic.
And that is true. That is happening in Germany.
And I think, you know, we've got to get this balance right. We can't economically disenfranchise ourselves by giving our competitors in Europe an advantage with cheaper energy. And we've got to take the rest of Europe with us if we're going to get greener. But at the end of the day, government is responsible for keeping the lights on. And if we abandon these coal-fired power stations, the lights will go out.
Well, it's in Germany they actually have a long-term plan to stop to go away from coal, and so in Germany they've managed in 2012.
If that's the case, why are they building all these new coal-fired
Because they're
power
phasing out
stations?
nuclear, so it's been a short-term plan, and I don't agree with it. It could have been avoided. I'm not, you know, I'm saying I'm pro-Germany in regards to this. However, the long-term plan is to move away from coal, and in the renewable sector, they have produced in 2012 5 times as much energy than our 16 nuclear power stations combined. So these are real figures that are doable and manageable.
If you look at the Danes, for example, the Danes went down the route of wind power and actually increased the amount of coal they burnt because they had to use coal in order to plug the gaps when the wind didn't blow. And I think you've got to get that energy balance completely right.
Mark, tell me about this, because you're on the government's green watchdog.
Yes.
What does that do? What's it there for? And isn't your government, wasn't it always saying we are going to be the greenest ever? How's
Absolutely.
that going?
And we're making quite good progress, actually, in terms of reducing the amount of carbon
we're looking at
burning. But of course, we're in a race with the rest of the world. And now, if you go charging over the hill and leave everybody behind you, all you do is export your carbon to another country. If you have to generate steel, if you don't make it in this country...
What about fracking, then? Is fracking the answer?
No, it isn't, and it's got higher greenhouse gas emission than a conventional coal. So we are going to run out of fossil fuels sooner or later. That's a fact. So we need to invest in renewables, and to say we can't do it too fast. For 30 years, we've been saying this needs to happen. 30 years, and we keep hearing, oh, we haven't got, you know, it needs to be slow. Our grandchildren, we owe it to them. Climate change is happening.
But is this going to be a big issue in the next election?
Carbon capture and storage is coming as well, and hopefully when we get to that position, we can continue to burn fossil fuels, capture the carbon.
It sounds like it is going to be a big issue in the next election.
I think energy will be massive.
The other thing is, you mentioned the grid, and that renewables may come and go depending on the weather, for example. You mentioned Denmark. Now, we've got a system, there's a European-wide grid, where you can nicely work with renewables in order to manage that, for example, if it's sunny in Spain and windy here, we can equally benefit from it. So we need to work together.
Do you honestly think the taxpayer in Paris will see the lights go out in Paris to keep them on in London? There is no chance. We need to be in control ourselves, look after ourselves.
We'll have to leave that one there.